Hi there, this is Alvin, and welcome to the Kickstart Commerce Podcast, where we share search marketing and domain investing strategies to help grow your business. In today's episode, our guest is none other than Bill Hartzer, a technical SEO consultant and domain name consultant, founder of Hartzer Consulting, and a contributing writer to a number of industry-leading search marketing brands and websites. Today, Bill and I discuss how he got his start in domain investing and development, when a brand should or should not consider gTLD usage, a detailed development case study of .cars, .diamonds, and .attorney websites, and last but not least, the biggest threats to the future of domain names as Bill sees it. So with that, Bill, welcome, and thank you for making time to join us today.
Thanks, Alvin. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, definitely. And so to give our listeners a bit of context here, so Bill and I actually met Bill back in 2017 at the, I believe it was the dinhouston.com meetup, where Bill actually spoke and shared a bit about SEO and domains. And so to kick things off, Bill, share with the listeners a bit about yourself, who you are, your professional and personal background.
Sure. I get probably, I've actually come originally from a technical writing background back in the early 90s, and kind of transitioned from doing more webmaster and technical duties with websites and so forth. And at the same time, I was learning, coding HTML and so forth, and also kind of got into creating websites and as well as doing, I'd say, the early days of affiliate marketing, and basically, running banner ads on websites I created, and, pitching products and so forth, and services, and getting money for referrals. That kind of, at that point, I had owned a few domain names and websites. That kind of transitioned into buying more domain names and to create more websites. And so traditionally, I haven't really been, originally in the early 2000s, when I kind of got more into buying domain names, I really wasn't buying them as an investment. I would actually, I wasn't really buying the domain name to then resell it. I was actually more in a mode of, buying a domain name and then actually using it and, immediately creating a website. Some of that, activity would be, looking at the former topic of the domain name and kind of figuring out, okay, well, this was a former website on this topic. And so, and based on the name and so forth, then I would, really just develop the site, and, create brand new content, for those. At the same time. So that's kind of how, going through that whole process from finding a domain to actually creating, it's, maybe installing WordPress or whatever CMS, or actually, hand coding the site, and actually going through that process from finding the domain, buying it, and actually then, creating a site. And then with the intention to create enough content to help it rank in the search engines. And so kind of going through that process over and over again really was the way I kind of learned SEO. And so as it occurred, I was still back in the late 90s, still ranking websites to try and get the traffic so that I could get the clicks on ads and so forth. But that kind of turned into, a in-house position, essentially moving from a webmaster and technical webmaster type of position, that I had, kind of moving into taking care of SEO and website traffic for the company, because, the marketing folks of the company realized that, we could get traffic and sales and rank well, for their main keywords. That allowed me to, international company, so allowed me to do the SEO essentially in 9 different languages, which I did, and get that kind of experience back in the early 2000s, in-house at a major telecom company, and so that kind of led into my experience moving from in-house into the agency world, where I actually worked for, a web design firm, and then moved into more, SEO type of roles, going through over the years, actually, we're having clients and ranking their websites and so forth, as well as then kind of moving up through the chain of command, so to speak, of, SEO manager, director, ran an agency for a while. Then at that point, I was kind of ready to move out and do kind of my own thing. Primarily I do concentrate now, past couple of years, primarily on technical SEO audits of websites. Anybody having issues with their website or traffic, as well as basically going helping domains domain owners move from one, for example, one domain name to another, domain name migrations and website migrations. So it's kind of a combination of different services. Over the years, I still have maintained a fairly sizable portfolio of domains. I do have some domains that are parked now. I haven't really used them for a project yet, but the majority of the domain names that I own are actually have live websites on them.
Huh. So then, I mean, so you've seen you've had quite the journey then, in terms of really understanding where search has come from and where it's going to.
Yes, it's interesting because what's happened is I've seen, whereas I've seen the whole process happen, where search engines were looking at content and looking at on page factors, if you will, and and primarily, and then also what is interesting is then we had Google come along and said, okay, well, let's look at links, and let's look at how links and on websites are linking from one website to another, one domain name to another. There's a big difference between having links from a lot of domain names or having a lot of links from the same domain name. So there's a lot of technical issues like that, and then the same thing with we'll have. I have found different domain. I've worked with different domain portfolio owners who will have one or two websites, and then they will have in one particular topic they'll have one or two websites, and then they'll own all the a portfolio of domain names in that niche. Whether or not you need to redirect those those other domain names and so forth, that can certainly be issues like that. So I've seen a lot of different scenarios, if you will, over the years, and whether it's development or just parking and so forth.
Gotcha. So then, in terms of today, so how many domains do you own in terms of your portfolio?
It's basically more in the hundreds. Not,
Okay.
I haven't gone, really, and over that.
Gotcha.
And it's more, most of them, you said the majority are actually have live websites on them. So, and I would say over, only probably in the past 10 years or so, I've concentrated a little bit more on domain development related, when on keyword rich domains. Most of the domains, I've where I've built websites over the years, really wasn't too concerned about the actual domain name itself. And I realized, actually, if I had taken the time, I've taken the time to get a key, really pretty good keyword rich domain, and seek those out specifically, and then and do the development that way. I wasn't really concerned about that, the domain name itself, as far as, yeah, so I've even though I've owned and still own a lot of domains, or a fair amount of domains, that they're not really domain investment quality, if you will.
And would you consider that? And so, and that's that's an interesting point, because, as you said, hey, you have 100 or so domains. Most of those are developed, and then knowing your background in terms of search, it really makes me kind of take a step back to go, well, obviously it's about content in terms of intent of search, and so you you have the chops, if you will, the experience to actually deliver there. And so I go, it really doesn't matter, if it's a .com, if it's a .net, or even a one of the newer extensions, because likely is the case, you could probably get almost anything to rank, is at least kind of basically what I sense. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, obviously, it comes down to it, that it doesn't necessarily have to be a domain name. Any web page, given the proper, content, whether it's, any URL can, can rank. I mean, there was a time, I would say, before. I'd have to go back and look at when, there was an update. Basically, there was a Google update where it specifically was the exact match domain update, and we call it, in the industry, we call it the EMD, the EMD update. And before that EMD update, Google actually, and I would put Bing and Yahoo also in there, but Google specifically was actually giving some extra weight, to having the exact match domain, .com. And basically, when they did that update, which was several years ago,
Right. I think like
um,
2012, right? I think somewhere
I
around there.
think so. I think so. I don't. I'd have to. I'd have to Google it or look at my notes. But, the EMD when that EMD update occurred, basically, they didn't. They basically, specifically, what they did is they removed the positive points for having an exact match domain name. So if it's dictionary.com, then previously, for the word dictionary, because it's a exact match domain, they were giving that extra weight, or extra brownie points, or extra extra page rank, or whatever,
Right.
ranking juice, or whatever you want to call it. They were giving some extra points to that, and a boost. But what they did is, when they did that update, they stopped giving that boost. So now, it has been, since that, has been a level playing field, whether it's a .com, .net, .org, .real estate, .attorney, .cars, or whatever it is. However, when it comes down to it, though, that there are a lot of ranking factors. And so, when you have, just inherently, when you have a exact match domain name, when you have a, whether it's, real estate, let's pick a word, use the word dictionary, whether it's, dictionary.com, .net, .org, .io, or dictionary.cars. What basically, they all have it right at the beginning. They all have the same. They all have the same, ability to rank,
Right.
and and that's, they all start fresh. But when we think of branding, and we think of names, you think of, if it's dictionary.com, that is a brand. And, or it's certainly it's a one word domain. And it's whether, the owner can, owner can build a website on it and make it a brand, make it a brand, make it a company, make it a, so whenever, what inherently happens once you put a website on it with content, other people start referring to it. And, and whether, if you were to launch and you get media attention and you get, or you get, you get links or mentions from other websites, the way those other websites mention your brand is they typically use those keywords. So the same thing with, let's look at Walmart, for example, walmart.com. Everybody, they're always going to rank for Walmart because everybody refers to Walmart as, that's their website and that's where it's located. That's the address, is walmart.com. So, when somebody says Walmart and they link and they make a link. So it benefits you whether, when you do have a keyword rich domain name and you use it for a website, so what has happened over the years is, as we have these keyword rich domains, these new endings, and let's think about, an example would be, a couple examples: home.loans or vacation.rentals. Vacation.rentals is a good example because it's a fairly, it's a new TLD rental,
Right.
.rentals. And the reason why it actually ranks for vacation rentals, and certainly this is my opinion, but it's not because any search engine or Google or, it's not, they're not ranking it because of the fact that it just happens to have the keywords in the domain, because we know back years ago and in this EMD update that all that extra stuff was removed from the algorithm, the extra bonus or the boost, for
Right.
exact math. So we have to look at other things, and the other things are basically is links, and which have a strong the links do have a strong, they're fairly links is a good ranking factor, and
Right.
it's a factor that has has a a
Probably
lot
has a
of
strong correlation.
exactly,
Yeah.
and yeah, I mean, that's one thing, and certainly Google has tested their algorithm without looking at links at all, and they just could not make it work very well. So it just so happens that when somebody links, they will link with with the anchor text, and the anchor text is that text that you click on, whether it's a URL or whether it's actually something like click here or or go back or whatever. If
Read
the blue
more.
underline click here, that is the anchor text, and so that describes the link that we're going to see. What we're going to see when we click on that. So that's what Google, the search engines and Google uses to, with anchor text. And we have vacation rentals links, and everybody refers to that as a brand and actually as a website and so forth. So that's why they're going to, one reason why they're going to rank. And so the same thing with vacationrentals.com versus vacation.rentals or vacationrentals.net. Once you create a website and start to get links and start to get mentions, and people start to click on the search results, then that's what people understand that they're going to find when they go to that domain.
Interesting. So then, Bill, in terms of some of you gave a couple examples there, and so obviously with the new extension. So in terms of your portfolio, like what types of names, I guess, do you find yourself buying today? Like do you own any of the new extensions, or are you more just kind of .com?
Sure. I have a lot of different a lot of different TL, domains in different spaces and different, some some that are new TLDs, and now not sure if we should call them new TLDs anymore. It's been 2013, 2014, almost 5 years now,
Right.
going on 6-7 years now that they're they new. And in fact, there is actually a .new, and
Correct.
that pretty soon, so Google owns .new. So actually, if you go to spreadsheet.new or
Doc.
it's interesting, you go to spreadsheet.new or docs.new, those will actually go to Google Docs, or start. It will start a new spreadsheet in Google Docs if you go to spreadsheet.new or doc.new. Pretty soon they're gonna open that up to anybody to have a .new domain, and they're going to be opening it up. I'm not sure when they're going to be doing that, if they haven't already, but that's interesting, for a new launch of a product or a new something new.
Right. And so,
But
and likely is the case, I guess, as we see more brands, like Google using the new extensions, then it'll probably become, I guess, common use, or could be.
yes, I mean, if what I'm seeing now is that that we're now at least 5 years into this, and when I drive around town, I do see I do see different businesses, local businesses, have a vehicle wrap with the domain name on it, and I do see good, decent extensions being used, of the new extensions, the newer TLDs, and which is good to see. And people, they always typically will do some, have their web address on there, and it'll be www dot whatever dot keyword, for their if they are service business, or solutions, services, plumbing, whatever it is. And I do those are fairly, they're getting used more and more, and people are accepting them more in the general public. I see that more and more often, that they are.
And now you've done, I guess, a few detailed development case studies, I guess, that are now probably a couple years old, I would imagine. I think you did one on like dot cars, if I'm correct, and then dot diamonds, and then I think there was an attorney, I want to say it was in Jacksonville, that
Yes.
made a switch from, I believe it was .com or .attorney. So, I mean, like, what did you find in those case studies?
Yeah. So overall, I think overall, basically, what I found was that there were different case studies or research, if you will. There were that had different goals in mind of figuring something out. Whether it was something that where somebody where somebody actually will do a search, and we put one basically a .com versus a .diamonds, and that was one of the beginning, or one of the first research studies that I did. Basically wanted to see if the domain name mattered, whether it was .diamonds or whether it was .com, and what people clicked on and what people converted with. And so even then, even though they were brand new, and that even back then, it was 2014, 2015, I did see good results from the .diamonds, and that people did convert really well, and they and they did click, and perform the action, that whether it was downloading a PDF, or going to search for a diamond, or shop for a diamond online. There were some good positive results even back then.
And those were,
And then
and I guess,
basically the other,
did you use?
well, the other studies were basically case studies where I had actually once observe the process of somebody switching from somebody switching a legitimate business from or migrating from one particular domain name to another.
Gotcha. So then, in the case of the diamonds, now I guess obviously there was some search ranking that was in there. Now, did you use any, I guess, like paid ads, or were there any testing done there?
Yes, in that particular case, it's difficult to do testing, or it's pretty complex to do SEO testing, and I'm working on some SEO tests for to be released in next month, hopefully, the results of those. But basically, you have to kind of have, in that case, you really would have two websites essentially that are the same, and you have to look at let the content of those be get indexed by the search engines and so forth. The problem is that there are potentially duplicate content issues, where if you were actually take one web page and copy the same exact web page and put it on one domain versus another, there would be some conflict there. And so that's it's difficult to test in that particular case. So you have to use basically some alternative methods to make the testing fair, if you will, and narrow it down. What I do like, though, is that you can control the environment and pay-per-click with SEM, and where you can actually have the same ad copy, the same exact batch keywords, the same landing page, on two different domain names or a dozen different domain names, send essentially the same traffic, or the same, people who'd search for the same keyword, then click and so forth. And you can see things like, how many, number of impressions. You can see, in Google Ads, you can see the quality score. You can see how many people clicked and converted. And you can also see the cost, because the quality score will determine how much, or as a part of a factor of how much you're going to pay. So overall, the initial testing doing pay-per-click is that whenever we used something other than a .com, in the most cases were it was a dot whatever dot diamonds or dot cars or whatever it was. Those actually were cheaper than actually using a .com, and so in case some cases it was you'd pay 86 cents or 80 something cents for a click if you bid $1. On a .com, on the equivalent dot whatever dot diamonds, you'd only pay 68 cents. So if you were spend $1,000 on a budget, you can imagine if you're only spend we would for the same traffic, if you could spend 68 cents per click versus 86 cents per click, it would be worth it to put a landing page on a new TLD, because your money is going to go further and you're going to get more clicks, potentially more potentially more conversions, or at least more eyeballs on your ads, because you're paying less, basically for the same keywords. That was the biggest difference, is that the quality score eventually was typically higher, and so you would pay less. And like I said, if you do the numbers and once you have a major campaign, $1,000, $10,000, $100,000, it can make a big difference. Paying 20 cents less per click,
Right.
Overall.
Right, definitely. And so then, in terms of like the dot attorney website, which is, I kind of key in on that, because it
Yep.
as I begin to think about like local businesses and just the sheer number of businesses. So like, for instance, Austin, I know just off the top of my head that there are 14 cities that are named Austin, within the U.S. And so when I start thinking about plumbing business or even attorney businesses, I'm like, there are only so many, geo-centric domains to go around, whether that's .com, whether that's a new
Sure.
extension. But the new extensions open up that door. And so, like, what were the findings of the attorney case study?
Well, in fact, in that particular case, that we had an attorney that was a personal injury attorney that, um, and he had, it was his name.com, and or his law firm name. So it wasn't, there wasn't any keywords in his domain. And he really had, with his content, he had a difficult time, being on the first page for Jacksonville personal injury attorney, and personal injury attorney, keywords, and Jacksonville, Florida is one of the biggest or most expensive markets for, in the country for, for those keywords.
Right.
And so anyway, so basically that what happened is he moved his website, and from basically from his name, his law firm name or his name to, Jacksonville.attorney. And, within a few weeks, he was on the first page, for Jacksonville attorney. So this was, well after the EMD update. And, so everything was, as far as the domain names are concerned, and I've talked to over and over again, and made it even public in public tweets. I've talked back and forth or tweeted back and forth with Google reps, and they claim, yes, I mean, there is no, the domain name really doesn't matter. There's no not necessarily any preference there. But like I said, what happened was, with the Jacksonville attorney, is that my belief is, because of, he created a brand with a new name, and he got links and got mentions and so forth. And, he began to be known as the Jacksonville attorney. And so that just overall just helped him rank for Jacksonville attorney, and in the other pages, Jacksonville, personal injury attorney, and, other pages he had on his site. And that just helped. And so whether it's, it's doesn't necessarily mean that particular key, that particular keyword happens to be a generic word, or a generic phrase. But the same being, if you look at, my brand, Hartzer.com, and my last name, and you look for Hartzer, you look for keywords with my name in it, it's not a generic word by any stretch of the mean, but, but when you're looking for a keyword, and, and the website and all the signals point to the fact that this is the place to go for that keyword, then if you put, if you do combine the domain with the, with website content, then you will, your unique website content, you will rank, and, you will rank, for that phrase.
So then, dangerous question time. So, which is more valuable? Is it the domain or is it the content?
It's a good question, because I think it's the most value, and I'm going to go back and forth and so forth, with traditional, domainers and so forth,
Right.
that, in basically it's a combination. It's I believe that when you have a keyword rich domain, and you add content to it, you are going to get traffic and rankings, and people, you are going to, and then you're going to get, that residual traffic, even if you don't have the rankings, you're still, from social media traffic, or, there's going to be some value there, and that's adds to the, the whole picture there. And it does get indexed by Google and so forth. And so there's more once you have a, if right currently, and this, it wasn't the case before. It used to be that Google back in the early 2000s, even if you parked a domain, it would be, it was indexed in the search, it was indexed in Google even if it was a parked domain, and it could rank. It's, if it was a website that maybe expired and they bought the, and you bought the domain name and you parked it, it still would rank for some keywords. I don't remember that, there was a time basically that Google stopped that and said, okay, if it's a part domain, doesn't have any, even though it might have a bunch of links, and it should rank, the content is not there, so we're going to basically remove it from our index. And so having content on it enough so that it is indexed and crawled on a regular basis, that adds value, because a domain name owner or somebody who's going to buy, even though if it's a great premium.com, it's going to, even, and they put some content on it, if there has never ever been content on it, or if there's been the wrong content on it, it's going to take time and expense to and to basically get that to rank, or get it at least where back in the search engine indexes and so forth. I know a pretty, fairly, there was a domain auction a little while back, let's say a year ago, one of these, probably the last, NamesCon auction, for example. I went through every single domain, in that, they were great domains. And I'm trying to remember the domain. It was, a 5-character, really, really good domain that, probably worth, just the name itself, worth at least $500,000 to $1 million. Well, it turns out that particular domain was what I call burned. Uh-oh. And even though it's a domain that's a $500,000 to $1 million, easily $1 million domain, okay, and it ended up getting sold, but for a large amount. The problem is that it had hundreds of thousands of spam and pills and Viagra type links pointing to that domain, and that were completely off topic to the subject matter of the domain. And so the amount of work involved in to get it to rank, or to get it to not necessarily rank for that one premium keyword, but even to start to get that new content indexed in the search engines, where it would start to show up for 4 or 5 long words, the long tail keywords. Mm-hmm. That wasn't even going to happen until you completely got that domain cleaned. And that's a big, that's a big process. It's not it's not something that you can just reset, just right. Because you buy the domain. I have seen some edge cases where somebody, where a company in particular bought a domain name at a GoDaddy auction. They used to use the hyphenated version of their company name, but they bought the non-hyphenated version. And when they bought the domain and moved everything, migrated to the new domain, they ended up setting up everything in Google Search Console, which was, Google Webmaster Tools. And immediately Google said, well, this domain name is banned in our search engine. It has a penalty, a manual action penalty, and for pure spam. And in that case, I actually was helped them get rid of that penalty, and we had to explain and show that essentially that they had bought the domain name, and they had bought a auction or whatever, and the content, the new, they had moved legitimately from the old hyphenated to the new one. And that was kind of an edge case. There's been cases where that Google is not, or won't take away those penalties, and so you have to actually get stuff cleaned up. How many hours of work would it take to notify hundreds of thousands of webmasters or site owners to remove a link that said Viagra pointing to your site, that that and all this spam and stuff. You can do these disavow files and so forth, but when it comes down to it, link cleanups and get and cleaning up bad SEO or bad spam on a domain name, that takes a lot of hours and a lot of work, because I've done a lot of that work, and that's one of the services that I traditionally have offered over the years is here's a domain that was a really good domain, but it's been spammed, or it's got really bad history, and so we want to use it for a legitimate business now, and how can we get past these penalties and actually use it for a website?
And so that's likely then you hit on an interesting point there in terms of for domain investors. If there's, it's almost one of those situations. If you see a name that's in auction and it's almost one of those too good to be true names, and you look and you go, oh, and it even has a backlink profile, likely is the case. It's probably going to likely lean more towards, I guess, being banned or having some sort of penalty associated with it than not. Is that a correct assumption?
I mean, there are people probably listening, to the broadcast that don't, or this podcast, and saying, hey, they don't really care. They don't even ever, and they don't even do any due diligence on a name. They don't look at, backlinks, or they don't look at, former content, or, it's a good name. It's a good name. Come back to dictionary.com. Well, that's great. I mean, if and sure, it's a great domain, but frankly, if a business bought that domain and they wanted to, they wanted to start using it as a major dictionary site, and if that had never had a website on it, it had never had any content, or that would be it would be a process to get that indexed and get everything going. Or if it was a name that just had massive amount of spam pointing to it, and spam links, and from blog comments to worst case scenario, where is a domain that somebody had, and it just literally they used it for massive spam efforts and email sending email spam through it, and also just having hundreds of thousands of pages that were just junk content. To get all that cleaned up, it's like I said, it's going to be a massive effort.
Interesting. And you mentioned the other part of that. Not only is it links, but email spam or being banned.
Yes, exactly. So basically, yes. So there's, so it's not just, and what you can't, one thing that I do, and that there is, domain name is used obviously for a website, and HTTP traffic. But there's also, there is also email traffic. And I know that there are a couple email parking companies out there, but what I actually do is when I buy a domain, I set a catch-all. I initially set a catch-all email address. So anything at that domain.com, whatever it is I forward that over to a Gmail account, because Gmail is pretty good about catching spam. So I kind of wanted I want an indication of how much email is going through that domain, and type of what type of emails were and that's just my kind of part of it is my curiosity to see what really the domain name was used for and so forth, and that's typical. I've had cases where I've bought domain names and that were expired, and noticed that there were emails that were probably important for somebody. So I contacted the former owner and said, hey, I've actually worked with them to, they knew that they let the domain name expire, but they still needed, certain emails. So I've worked with them to either set up an email account so that anything at that old email address would forward to them. I'm not, interested in any, personal email or anything like that. So, I do that, whenever I notice things like that. But kind of, I want to, I look at email blacklists. I look at a lot of different, scenarios. Certainly, as well as my part of my due diligence effort is a process, even before I buy a domain, or even consider it, is looking at just a basic word search over at the trademark search, which is TESS on the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO search. I know that's not an extensive worldwide search, but it kind of gives you an idea of whether it's what number one, if there are it's interesting because if it's a domain that has if there are words that have a lot of trademarks, in different industries. And so that can kind of indicate that even though it's not necessarily a trademark domain, but there may be a lot of people interested in that topic. So they've named their business certain, including a word in that domain or something related. And so it's, you can find possible, future owners that way. But it kind of also just depends on the name itself.
Gotcha. So then kind of changing gears here. So in terms of threats towards domain names, obviously, whether you're a domain investor or, you consider yourself a domain developer, whether you're developing for lead generation sites or what have you, what do you perceive as, looking forward into the future or even at current day, what are some of the biggest threats to the future of domain names?
That's a good question. So, basically there's a couple things. I mean, as I live in a fairly I live outside of Dallas, which is kind of I would say more of a rural area and a community. And it's interesting because over the years I've that I've been here 20 plus years, and I've seen things change. It used to be that local business, they would make a website. They would make sure that somehow they would create a website and so forth, and for their business. And what I'm finding is that they're not creating websites anymore. They're not really, they're going, even having their business for years and not even having a domain name. They don't even think it's necessary. And so, that's a small business that, they might have obviously one location. And they do well. What they're doing though is they're creating a Facebook page, and they use Facebook and their Facebook page, and that's how they get their customers and stay, you know, uh, uh, you know, that's their digital marketing presence is their Facebook page. And they're posting their Facebook page, and they're getting likes and shares and so forth with their current customers and their friends and people in their community. They're not even really paying attention to Google My Business, and which is a Google listing, Google local listing for your business. So primarily, that is one area that that a lot of, at least small and medium-sized businesses, they are more concerned about their Facebook page and their Facebook presence than buying a domain and creating a website. Because it might have to do some of it might have to do with cost, but they don't realize that really,
That's
literally,
risky.
you could buy a domain name for let's say $10 and per year, and the website might cost you $10 a month or something like that, a minimal amount, just to once it's up and running, for and so primarily there's that whole crowd of the people who are not, who are business owners who aren't going out and buying and creating domain names and websites. That's been the trend in the past couple of years that I've seen. Then the other area is apps. And so once you get into, maybe a smaller business may not, in particular, they may not go and create an app, but a larger business. And so we have certain businesses that really are just known for their app. And if I'm going to go to Amazon to buy something, if I'm on my laptop, I might go to Amazon.com. But if I'm on my phone, if I just need to buy something real quick or search something on Amazon, I just go to the app. And so I think that's going to be, those are two threats potentially to domain ownership and essentially the value of domains. If either of those become more, as they become more and more popular. Same with if it gets easier at some point for a local business, to create an app, then why would and then and they can just go create an app for a fairly cheap amount. Why spend time buying a domain name and a premium domain and so forth? I mean, so those are two things that I'm watching. Is the is how apps are doing overall, and how Facebook is doing, and so forth.
I mean, that seems if I'm thinking like the local business, that seems like I put all my eggs into one basket. And so if my account gets revoked, deactivated, there goes my business.
Exactly. And so that's one issue. So here's one of the problems is that I've actually worked with a business that they come to me because they have website and so forth and domain name and all that. But when they go to Facebook and they they go to share a post on their page, nobody can share the page because Facebook has restricted sharing from their Facebook page. And so the next would and it could be that we've kind of ended up figuring out why, because because of the type of business, and there were certain posts that had words that were kind of banned words in Facebook that you couldn't really post about. But it was essentially it's actually a business that is that sells they sell different items, but they were selling in majority of their things that were popular were metal detectors. And because of certain posts, for some reason, there was, I think, some posts that something about, using a metal detector to find, bullet shells or spent bullet shells or something like that were, in the ground or something to that effect. And because of that post, it included guns and bullets and so forth, that basically Facebook said, no, you can't post, on Facebook anymore. And so there's sometimes just issues and filters and all that. And then, then obviously if there's reputational management issues, if somebody, starts to, have a problem with your post or something like that. So you don't really have control, certainly if, as much as you do, certainly when you have your domain name.
Interesting. And so that,
and the same thing comes down to also, the same thing comes down to, do you use your primary email a Gmail account, or do you have, is it with your with your name, with your domain name? And so I have so many people, and I saw, I know so many companies that will have a domain name and a website, and they're using, their Gmail,
right,
as their email. Now, in fact, they'll go to their website, and their email on their website will be their Gmail. Well, a simple setup, actually, you probably know, and a lot of listeners know, that you can go on your web server and set up a forwarder. So any, sales at yourdomain.com will be forwarded to your Gmail account, where you can get it and you respond to it by Gmail. So you don't even have to have, those setups. So it is, so definitely, there is definitely a use for domains, and there will be, obviously, continue. And I always, when I every semester I go to our local college and talk to college students about their, about domain names and about websites and, SEO and digital marketing. And one of the first things I try and convey to them specifically is, go get yourname.com and own your, own your online presence, and create a website, make sure you rank for your domain name, for your name, and that will help, your personal brand going forward.
Interesting. And so, in terms of the those threads, so obviously you said Facebook, you said there are apps.
Primarily Facebook and apps.
Right.
Those are two areas that that I'm looking at this point.
So then what about voice search? Is that something that's going to impact domains, or something that you go, that's really not a factor?
It's a good question. You can't really, I think we're still very in the preliminary stages of it. And you can't necessarily optimize for voice search. You can, there are some things, you can create an Alexa skill. If you do have a brand and a website and so forth, and you can create create a skill. And that, and then obviously people have to install that, or, essentially, and add it as a skill to their Alexa device. What I'm finding, there is in the schema code markup, there is a speakable schema format, and so you can on your website, you can indicate that and put that code on your website. But primarily right now, right now we are, when it comes down to the different assistants that we have, or voice search, we're basically at the point where the majority of the websites that are the trusted websites, being the Wikipedia type of websites, the ones that have knowledge panels and that are not part of the knowledge graph. That in particular, those are the websites that are going to provide the information. When you are using voice, specifically like Siri, for example, on your iPhone, if they don't have the information, or she doesn't have the information that she can share, then she obviously will point you, here is what I found on the web for that. And so the majority of things that I have asked here or there, there are a lot of things that just the voice assistants don't know yet, and I think that's what we're going to see in the future, very very fairly quickly in the next couple of years, is that those the voice search is going to become more. They're going to have more data. But right now, it's still the only ones that are really benefiting from it as far as potential traffic or brand mentions, in voice search results. When it comes to domains, are the Wikipedias and the more trusted sites. I have not seen specifically where adding the voice schema code to your site is not really a benefit. For example, I have it on my site, but when I go do the voice search, and I ask, one of these voice assistants, for example, who was Bill Hartzer, they if it's on a device where like a speaker, then they won't know, even though I'm providing that code and we're supposed to provide that code. Speakable markup, it's not there yet. We're not there yet.
So too early to tell.
But but it is a bet. I do encourage, marking up your site with schema, marking it up with, the speakable schema code, and taking advantage of, of that, basically taking advantage of, that, schema code and different markup code that is for that. Because, for example, Google's rolled out FAQ page schema, and that is, that is a lot of websites don't have that. And so in a case where you've put that code on your site, it's a big advantage right now. So anything that is, an official, code like speakable schema, I would look into it, and if it's not going to take you a lot of time, then sure, I would implement it, because it is a standard, and they could turn it on next week, or in a year or two. If you already have it, then great, you're already set.
Yeah, that's it. That's interesting when I start thinking, because I know that there are domain developers out there, and it's like, great, add that to add the schemas to your sites for both the voice search as well as just schema in general. Then my mind wanders in terms of domain investors. Oftentimes, they're putting up sites with landers, and sometimes they're their own custom landers, and so it's like, okay, well, with the landing pages, they could obviously do the content, but they could do some of these things that you just discussed in terms of adding schema for that given domain name in the event that a voice search occurs in the future and likely
Sure,
picks up
there
that
is a
domain name.
business model out there that with domains that that I have spoken to a few people with specifically at this this business model is you buy especially a geo domain, or you maybe have a bunch of geo related domains. It would make sense to especially geo names where frankly I've seen in the past 10 years, I have seen geo domains, like a city name lawncare.com or city name cleaning.com or city name attorney.com. I've seen the values of those change. There was a big demand at one point for those, and local businesses were really snatching those up and wanting those. And I've seen that kind of change over the years. But there's so if you are sitting on a bunch of geo domains, if you wanted to sell them, there is a really good opportunity to actually just go ahead and develop them to a certain extent. Not necessarily make it, put hundreds of pages or anything, but a good 5 or 10 page site, um, and getting it to rank with the schema code, with the whatever, with good title tags and decent content, maybe a few links, taking some time. You could actually, there is a market for you know a business that is a Dallas attorney to, if they could then turnkey, just literally buy that domain and it already ranks, they could just make some changes to the current site, put their own branding, on the current site. That's a benefit to them, and they will, they'll pay for that. Whereas a domain that is just the domain that you cannot, you cannot sell right now, that is definitely an option, is to do some basic rankings. I have a domain like that is a good keyword rich domain, and I paid somebody $30 to write 5 or 10 different very small articles. They were actually kind of more descriptions, or a paragraph basically, and about something, and about that related to that topic. And it for several years now is ranked on the first page for that keyword, and it does get some traffic, and so there is something to be said about doing some basic domain development that really is not going to cost you a lot, given if it's a $20,000 or $30,000 domain or $10,000 domain, and you're going to put $100 into content. I mean, and get it to rank well, and to be get more traffic and potentially some more clicks on it, making it more valuable later on, that's definitely a benefit.
Right, right. And that's something that it's kind of one of those things of I think oftentimes domain investors that those that strictly domain invest, they kind of think, man, I don't necessarily have the skills, to go and set up a WordPress site. But that being said, most hosting providers now provide like one-click installations and managed
Sure.
WordPress that
Yeah, the next question is, okay, how do we scale that? Okay, so we need 5 or 10, let's say 10 pages on a site that's unique content, and adding some of the schema and so forth, and maybe if it's a geo name, we maybe get a Google My Business listing for it, and so forth. How you sure you could do you could do a few, 3 or 4 of those in a day, but how would you, the big question is, how do you scale that to 100 domains, 1,000 domains, 10,000 domains, owning 10,000 geo domains, how do you actually develop and that, where there's some value, additional value.
Right. Now that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. And so in terms
There
of
are
rap,
certainly are ways to do that. I mean, there are certainly ways, certainly, there's, take 1,000 geo domains and sure, there are ways to, you know,
like
to,
multi-site and
yes. I mean, there
yeah,
are, there are some ways to get those, it will take some work and some investment, but I do believe that it's, especially in the geo names in that space, I think at this point, that's going to be, that's going to allow you to flip or sell that domain fairly quickly versus just having a name that is just a, um,
yeah,
that is just specifically just the name itself. And
right.
frankly, I have gone through, I did work with a domain owner that, and worked with them, and these names were, there was over 1,000 names, and they were all geo in the same niche, and different cities across the U.S. And think, city name plus keyword.com. 10 years ago, they were really highly sought after. Unfortunately, in the past year or two, they're not as much, especially when it comes down to those, the actual small business owner. And so, and it was, I worked with that particular, you know, owner as a as I stepped into kind of a broker role to help them sell those, and literally did the outreach. And of 1,000 names, we just were not able to, there was just not the interest there. And that's basically taking, for example, let's say Dallas attorney, and across, let's say across 1,000 different cities, and contacting every single attorney in Dallas that ranked for Dallas, that keyword Dallas attorney in the top 30 results. So, let's say, 30 contacts, they, direct contacts, and, by email and by phone, they just were not interested. And it's interesting because, like I said, that has changed. 10 years ago, they would want those. Um, and that's in, one thing that I've seen change in the past couple of years with these geo specific names.
That's interesting. That is really interesting because, um, like I said, it you would think that you would, especially like a city like Dallas, because I know that there's Dallas, Texas, there's Dallas, Pennsylvania, and there's likely other
Well,
cities,
this was, so yeah, this effort was not just one city. This effort
some
was,
multiple.
I had a staff working on this, doing the outreach,
Wow,
and full time, and
and
so,
not one.
and of the, of, let's say, I would say 50,000 emails and calls, um, out at outreach, they were less, with 1,000 names, there were less than 50 names that sold. And where the domain owner, um, wanted, was looking at a minimum of $1,000 plus for each name, we could only get, um, $200-300 per name. So it is drastically changed.
Wow.
There is not the market, and it could be just that particular niche.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't legal or attorneys. It was, more of a, think of like a homeowner service type of business.
Right.
That 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 and granted, it's interesting because that service, every sale, the provider providing that service, they make $700 to $1,000, for just 3 or 4 hours work. So, and they're not, I mean,
So it's not a low profit, or I mean, a low margin.
no, it's not. It's not certainly an attorney, but it's not something that's just
like a nail salon.
Yeah, it's not a locksmith or something that's $100 or $200.
Right.
It's and so we could not even sell them. There was just not the interest. There were a couple, like I said, there were a couple markets that were odd markets that were not necessarily big cities. They were smaller cities where there was a little bit more competition, and those domains did ultimately sell, but not for nearly what they should have sold for. So that gave me an indication of basically if the market for those geo names has dropped out, has bottomed out, and that goes back to the fact that that same owner, having a Facebook page and having a free Google My Business listing, they get all the business they need. And so they felt like they don't necessarily, they may have a website, but they don't need the, city name keyword.com because, they don't, that's what, like I said, before Facebook came around with Facebook pages, they really wanted those. And I think, my personal opinion is that, Google My Business and Facebook pages have really cut into that market a lot. And, especially, the market for those geo keyword, city name keyword.com domains.
Now that and it, I mean, and it makes sense, like I said, because of the user experience, the ease of use. But like I said, at least when I look at it, I go, man, that's a risky undertaking that you could lose access at any given moment, and that you don't really own your customer data.
Yes, exactly.
And so so that's just scary in and of itself. So then, as we wrap up, I mean, so if folks, obviously they've heard your breadth of experience, so if they wanted to contact you, how might they do so?
Sure. I mean, obviously you can do a search for Bill Hartzer or and any online and find. I have Hartzer.com, HARTZER.com, and I have a fairly popular blog at BillHartzer.com, where I'm writing about SEO, domains, tech, and marketing, social media, and so forth on there.
Now, will you be attending NamesCon, which is held here in Austin in my backyard in January 2020?
Yes, in fact, I am speaking at NamesCon this year. I'm going to be presenting more data and more research about that I'm doing, and updated research about the new gTLDs, and doing some, SEO testing and some other interesting testing with, .com, .net, .org, .icu, .bonds, .club, and all the main, focusing primarily on the main more popular TLDs. And in this case, it just makes sense that based on the sheer number of registrations, that's what I'm looking at. So, right just now, .icu, .top, .club, those are the primary, as far as number of domain registrations, and .xyz, and then .com, .net, .org, and so forth. I'm looking at those. And so looking at basically using the same keyword and seeing which one of those ranks, which one ranks above, more quickly, which one has pages that get indexed more quickly, and just based on some basic SEO factors. And so that's one of the tests that I'm looking at. And then other domain research I'll be doing, as far as current domains that are registered and websites that are registered in different popular TLDs.
Awesome. Well, so there you hear it. I mean, if you haven't purchased your NamesCon 2020 ticket, definitely purchase it. And like you said, I mean, he gave you a synopsis of what he's going to be going over, and sharing in great detail. So, you certainly want to get your ticket. So, Bill, I look forward to seeing you in a month or so. So, well, with that, we're out of time. So, Bill, thank you again for joining us today and sharing your search marketing as well as your domain investing and development experience.
Thanks, Alvin.
Yeah, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Kickstart Commerce, where we share search marketing and domain name strategies to help grow your business. And so if you please subscribe to this podcast via iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or Podbean. Last but not least, please visit kickstartcommerce.com to subscribe to the weekly newsletter sharing tips and tricks about the disciplines of digital strategy. Thanks, and that's all for now.